everybody. I hope you guys are having an incredible week. So today I'm going to be talking to you about prenatal trauma. So prenatal trauma is something that is one of the things that I encounter the most in my work. And usually I'm very excited to get to that point because it really is the root of primary belief systems and programs that are then developed in early childhood and reinforced in early childhood up until the age of 7. And then after that, it becomes a pattern, a repetitive pattern in the child's life as they develop into their teen years and into the adulthood. So what's really interesting about this is that the programs that we receive in vitro are actually incredibly powerful. And they are perceptions that are created that really define the perception of the divine feminine and masculine of the person that is coming into this experience. And when we talk about feminine and masculine, sometimes we might think that that's not really something that is impactful, but it really affects our entire perception about ourselves and the way we interact with the external. Why? Because the design of ourselves as these multidimensional organisms are made up of that dualistic expression. And the dualistic expression is designed down to the molecular level of our body. The molecular level of our body has this dualistic expression of feminine and masculine, positive and negative charges that create these fields, these design, I guess you can say, the expression of these organisms down to the molecular level up to your entire physical body. And this is the design that nature has chosen. Essentially, it is the blueprint of manifestation of life force in the multiverse. And because we live in a three-dimensional plane, the law of three is representing the father, the mother, which then unites in order to create life. And so that's what we are. We are a self-similar pattern to that creation design, that blueprint. The physical body down to the cellular, and in the macro side of it, our families are structured in that way. Society is structured in that way. The entire world functions in that way. Even the flow of life force through the planet Earth functions in this positive, negative life force movement. The galaxies, the planets, universe, and so on and so forth until the largest macro system, which we are participating in, is continuing to manifest itself in that way as well. So this is something that is essential to the product, the output of yourself as an experiential manifestation. So what does that mean? This program, these belief systems that are created in the womb at the stage of gestation, design the way looking at the world. It designs the experiences that we're going to be having. It creates a frequency resonance for your entire organism, the physicality of your body, including illnesses, diseases, potential limitations, mental limitations, emotional limitations, and even the potential that you have as seeing yourself as an organism in the bigger picture and the role that you play. And in the moment of conception, where the egg is fertilized, there is an incredible explosion that is the creation of these two frequencies, the mother and the father, that unite and merge and entangle in order to create this third. You are the product of that third, and that third is infused and informed by cyclical programs that are brought down the genetic lineage. Now, it's very important to notice that both our parents are a vibrational resonance to one another, even if the relationship is not a good relationship, or it's a forced marriage or a forced relationship, or any kind of imbalanced union. They are united by resonance. And this is something that oftentimes takes a lot of time to really realize and recognize, because you have to really be able to take a look at the patterns of behaviors. And what we see at face value is never what is actually occurring in the subconscious mind and the intention behind that organism. And so through DNA reprogramming, this is something that allows us to really do the study of the psychology, the emotional development, and then the physical manifestation and expression of these belief systems that we now are experiencing in our everyday lives with our family, with friends, and the way that we see ourselves in the world. So this kind of self-study, in my opinion, is one of the most important things to do, because with these limited belief systems that are a result of these cyclical programs, they keeps us trapped in an illusion of limitation. And one of the greatest disservices that we can do to ourselves as humans in this experience, this incredibly beautiful life experience that we have, to have the potential of the infinite potential that we have, is that we believe things that are not true. And the programming behind that is enforced by emotional trauma, physical trauma, energetic trauma, and it's enforced by our society, because we continue to collectively reinforce these cyclical patterns to each other. And so when we wake up and we realize that a lot of these patterns that we're reinforcing really cause suffering, not just to ourselves, but we're living in a lot of lies and untruths, limited perceptions that do not support expansion, we begin to kind of look at, the collective state that we're in, and you begin to understand why there is so much suffering in the world around us. And in my early journey, this was one of the most powerful and impactful things to realize, because we contribute to this suffering in ways that we don't realize until we understand ourselves and those patterns. And we contribute to these systems of sufferings in more indirect ways, whether it's systems that we're supporting in society that are very parasitic, that are service to self, anything from, it can be industries of the food, like toxic foods, toxic clothing, fashion, cosmetics, society, politics, religion. All of these systems are inversions, unfortunately, of what is true and what is natural, what is creative for the human. And so we begin to notice that because we are made up of a lot of traumatized generations after generations of trauma, our world is an expression of that trauma, and we are participating in that in many different ways. So in order to take a step back and to notice our participation in that, our first step is our emotional state, because we are driven by our emotions, and we are also manipulated and enslaved by the lack of mastery of our emotions and awareness of ourselves. And so this is where we need to do our work, because without the complete awareness and mastery of our emotional selves, it can be very confusing, and it can be very easy and very quickly able to get lost in some of these systems and lose clarity and focus. There are many distractions in the world around us that are very apt at confusing and distorting things in a way where, if we're not clear in our understanding of our emotions and the evolution of emotions, we can very easily, become sidetracked. And then the next phase happens to a person that wakes up, in which, after the dark night of the soul, sometimes they go back into these systems, because everything is a cyclical pattern, and they experience a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and then they feel separate again. So as with everything, the design of our experience here in the human three-dimensional plane are cyclical patterns. And so we just have to become aware of that in our evolutionary process, that the more we wake up, the more we're going to be faced with the same self-similar programs of deprogramming on different levels, okay? And I just want to mention that, because a lot of times people get frustrated when they think they've done all the deprogramming possible, but they're still experiencing these patterns in their lives. This kind of evolutionary work, it's really never ending. Because we are multidimensional beings, and our awareness and waking up is not only happening in the physical dimension. Once you begin to master somewhat the physical dimensional plane, you got to start mastering the interdimensional planes, your dream time, and even experiences in interdimensional aspects of yourself are becoming available to you. That being said, let's go back to the womb. And the most powerful aspect of prenatal trauma is that during the moment of conception, this signature is created, and there is a window of time in which the mother and the father adjust to the realization of that creation that they have united to create. And that moment of realization creates a vibrational container for the child, because a lot comes up when people are now being called to become parents, or when they're being called to, realize and readjust their lives into bringing a new soul. The whole material aspect of it, whether it's financial or physical, all of those logistics are aside. But what really matters is the emotional state of both mother and father at that moment, because in that moment, they create a signature, a container for the fetus that is being gestated in the body now for the coming 9 months. And it's within these 9 months that the child is acutely aware of all its surroundings. It feeds off the mother emotions, it feeds off the mother's food, it feeds off the mother's intentions, feelings, and it feels everything around it, and it's deeply through its DNA connected to the father. So everything that the father is feeling is also felt in the womb. I'm going to insert, if I can, a video here about the fetus that is experiencing trauma from its family. And as you can see, the family is fighting and yelling in the house, and the fetus jumps in the womb. It jumps out of terror because of the hearing the fighting and the sound and the yelling. So the first time I saw this video, I became very emotional, because it really is incredibly impactful, and to realize that life is so delicate and important. And it is just as you and I, are incredibly empathic in our world, the children that are being born, and this is a whole nother topic that we'll talk about some other time, but the children are incredibly interconnected. They're interdimensional in that womb. And so when they're infused in an environment with chaos and fear and suffering and anger and frustration, this really impacts the way that the child feels, not only about themselves, but about the world outside of them when they come out. And it creates a profound programming down to the cellular level of the body, sometimes to the point where the children are born with illnesses or disabilities. And we've seen a lot of this if we look at the generational birth rates of illnesses through history, going back down to the 20s. That's our recorded time. Of course, this has been happening for centuries, even before that. But if you look at the level of traumas through centuries and the kind of diseases that are developed in the womb more prominently through these stages, through the eras, you're going to begin to see little patterns. Each illness, of course, has a somatic root, a root in the emotional system. And so we keep our eye on that, because not only that, but the lineages that contain illness in their DNA, in their generational DNA, are more prone to accessing that data and embodying it, incorporating it into the fetus at the time of birth. So deciding to bring a life into the world is incredibly important. And I will talk a completely different video about this. I've been really wanting to do that for a long time, because I think we're at a point in our evolutionary state where several things are happening. The rate of childbirth has gone down collectively, but at the same time, it hasn't gone down for any kind of healthy, conscious reasons. It's gone down because of fear. And there are many interlacings that occur at the time of birth, contractual agreements, experiential agreements with the soul of the child that's coming into life, that is united with the resonance of this bloodline, that is created and designed even before the child is created, even before the two parents meet each other. These groups of families are pre-designed. And the souls that come into the body, whether they come into full term and birth into a child, or they are cycled back in, are frequency expressions with unique data that is adjusting the DNA of both parents that are participating in the creation of the child, of this soul. And moving forward into these trimesters, let's go through the trimesters of the development of the child. The development of the child from the fetus until the 9-month period, even premature children, all of that has a very specific reason based on the vibrational environment that is available to the child. And also the moment that the two parents are required to come and play a role as parents in that union. So this prenatal trauma really is something that is such a profound belief system that's created. And the belief system that's designed through this experience is basically the mother and the father, they play a role through that gestation process. And that role is a vibrational frequency expression of the feminine and the masculine. And when these two individuals don't have a clear understanding of the balance of those two expressions, their actions, their expressions, their emotions, their subconscious belief systems are infused by that imbalance. And together, then they create a bigger imbalance because they are playing off each other in order to maintain a balance according to their best understanding of the balance of those two. Somehow we manage to complement each other energetically because, again, we are united by resonance, and usually the same lesson that the two parents have to learn are learning it together in contrasting ways that link them together. And so the child then is in the womb gestating with these two belief systems, and it basically formulates the structure of its feminine and masculine of the fetus, the way that it holds energy in the body, the structure of its body, the geometric expression of the body. All of that is created by this vibrational frequency. And the child will be a product of all of that. It also has the ability, each soul that comes into the new bloodline has the ability of changing, healing. They are specifically designed and equipped to change the frequency and the patterns of these two bloodlines, which is really, really amazing because every single one of us, when we start doing this deprogramming work, we begin to realize that the gifts that we have, even the things that we love to do, the things that bring us joy, our hobbies, our special traits and gifts, whatever it is, the things that you're doing, even the careers that you choose, they are a product of these belief systems. But oftentimes they are unique studies of experiences that will help support what you need in order to heal these cyclical patterns. And that's really the amazing thing about us as humans, that once we realize that and we heal ourselves, we also have the ability to begin to heal our ancestral lineage. And this is how we do it. We do it by recognizing that cyclical pattern. So prenatal trauma, essentially, once that signature of impression is created within the child, the moment that the child is born, that birth is also really important. Whether the two parents are present, whether they're afraid, whether they're welcoming, whether there's love, whether there's support, all of those things are felt by the child. Even the subconscious beliefs and emotions of each of those parents is felt by the child. That's really important to note, because a lot of my clients, when they go back to the womb and go to the birthing experience, they are very acutely aware of the fear or the insecurities or doubts of the mother or the father, or the rejection even of either one of those parents at that time. So the child really feels everything. And remember that because time is not linear, we have the ability to transport into these moments, these points in our frequency field in order to tune into the true expression of that experience. And even though, some people have ideas of what their experience was, it isn't until you revisit that experience that you can begin to really have a more neutral perspective of what occurred. And it helps people understand themselves better. Now, that's prenatal trauma. How do we heal this? How do we begin to correct any kind of influence? Well, what's going to happen after that initial birth is that you have 7 years in which the child is completely active, and its chakras are most available, and the child is most available for programming. Okay, so what that means is that energetically it's more programmed. What that means is that if the parents are aware of themselves and the experience that the child had in the womb, it can begin to support the child and begin to hopefully help deprogram any kind of belief systems that the child will take on. A lot of times the child will take on as themselves as the parent. So for example, if the mom is afraid of bringing a life, doesn't feel safe to bring into a life, this child, because the father is not available or something like that, whether emotionally or physically or mentally, usually the child will want to overcompensate, and they will want to provide safety and emotional support for the mother. So this immediately creates a kind of codependent relationship that really affects the child's life and also the parent's life. And codependent relationships in these family circles really stagnate the potential evolution of each member. So the sooner we can understand where we're tuning into these kinds of relationships, the quicker we can hopefully expand and heal and create a more expansive experience in our families. And as parents, it's incredibly important to kind of do the work and review, our true emotions, because a lot of times, because of our own trauma and our own childhoods that we have imprinted as children, we're kind of just repeating, and this happens every time in my sessions, we recognize that we're repeating the programs that our parents had about us when we came into life. And so times are changing, and we have to really check in to see if we agree with that way of thinking anymore, or have we evolved from there? Have we moved on from that limiting belief system? And from there, begin to access the tools that are available to us through our emotions, through our clarity and understanding, and be able to hold space for this new soul as it comes into the world. And it requires a lot of understanding of what love is. And this brings me to my last part of this topic today, is we are basically reparenting ourselves throughout our entire lives. And because we are not a collection of humans that have come into the earth experiencing love, we are a product of generations and generations of experience of separation, and therefore we have not, a lot of us, even felt love in our lives before. True love, this unconditional love is what I'm talking about. We really don't know what that even feels like. And so there has to be a moment of re-education that is in the nervous system of the body, because all of this trauma is being held in the nervous system. It's programmed in the chakra system. The chakra system is a holographic system that stores the data in the multidimensional body, creates points of references, which we are continuing to access through triggers and traumas, again, that happen externally. And so we just reinforce and reinforce the same limiting belief systems. So in order to learn how to feel unconditional love, we have to feel unconditional love for the self first. And so that requires a really powerful compassion for yourself, for the darkness of our own self, which, what does that mean? It seems like such a cliche word. All of the parts of you that we fear, that we reject, that we are resentful towards, parts of us that feel anger towards, whether it's your own parents or yourself, or taking on things that weren't part of you, all of that has to be addressed. And I highly, highly, highly plead and suggest, in order to help create less suffering in this world collectively, that when we are planning on bringing children into the world, that we really take this healing work incredibly seriously. Because this is kind of like the new human. This is the new human that we are being called to embody at this time. A level of consciousness and awareness that is mindful of what we're creating. And I think we're ready for that. We are collectively waking up. We're aware of doing the work. That's become such a common thing for a lot of us. For enough of us to begin to make a change in this world, that we're not just talking about things and maybe once in a while doing meditations on it, but actually changing the way that we live and contributing to the collective. And bringing life into this world is one of the most important things that we can begin to focus on, and hopefully educate ourselves as humans, as part of a collective, as parents, and learn how to become parents. Because parents, becoming a parent, we have to learn how to parent ourselves and parent each other. Essentially, we end up becoming, we hold space for others, in other words. And that responsibility is a responsibility that we have towards ourselves as organisms of creation. And it comes as part of the job of experiencing the three-dimensional plane. And becoming a parent means learning how to love unconditionally. It is the union, it's the marriage between the feminine and masculine within you, that once you balance those aspects of yourself that you want to separate from yourself, that are fragmenting you, into a wholeness, you now become a holistic human. And this holistic human is now, through that unconditional love, really able to harness its own life force into intentional creation. And that's not something, it's a great responsibility, and it's something that's powerfully revered across all dimensional planes. We see this with hybridization program, because we understand that vibrational signature is something that has to be cultivated. And so most of us, we're walking around like wild animals, really, in the wild, wild west, just completely surviving and completely unaware of the participation and responsibility of being inside of this fractal vessel of experience. So this is something that I really, really feel called to talk about, and really want to spend a little more time on, because I do work with a lot of children, and I really love working with children, because the children at their young age, they are less programmed than we are. Some of us have experienced trauma after trauma, reinforcing over and over again traumatic experiences, and we lose sight of what's true. Children understand immediately, because it's their expression. It's fresh for them. And what I mean fresh is they're intuitively connected to themselves. They haven't programmed fear into the nervous system, where they don't feel safe accessing that source information. And it isn't until they experience trauma that it becomes a little difficult to access that data. So the idea is to start early and allow them to enhance and cultivate that access to their source. Now, in addition to this is another topic which has to do with food, with emotions, with environment, with all of these things that we can go into, and we will. But I'm just going to end this video here discussing this prenatal trauma. And if you guys have any questions, please post them down below. I would love to hear your comments and let me know, have you checked out your inner child? Have you checked out yourself in the fetus? And have you experienced what that was like for you? What kind of programs were created for you in the fetus? I'll be very happy to hear your feedback. And to all of you that are here working, doing the work, thank you so much for everything that you do. And I love you so much. Unconditional love.